The SNC-Lavalin scandal has rocked Canada, and Justin Trudeau has been tied up in the middle of it. So for weeks now, we've seen headline after headline with serious concerns about what Justin Trudeau's role in the scandal was. And even today here in Ottawa, the scandal continues. So in the middle of all of this, and you realize like last week that we, the Conservative Party, we did everything that we could. We used every tool at our disposal to hold Justin Trudeau to account. We're continuing to do that this week here in Ottawa. But I wanted to come to you and unpack a little bit about something that has been buried in the middle of all of this scandal. And that's the fact that Justin Trudeau has announced tens of billions of dollars of cover-up spending last week, and we're starting to unpack this. I'm at my desk here in Ottawa, and I'm reading through this, the fine print at the back, which that's where all the good stuff usually is, and there's just a few things I want to highlight for you. And the theme for me that's really striking in this is the fact that Trudeau has spent tens of billions of dollars that we don't have, and there's really not a lot that we're getting for it outside of him desperately trying to change the channel on the SNC-Lavalin scandal. That's sort of one of the big things that I'm taking away. The other thing that I'm taking away is this is probably the most divisive type of spending and tax that we've seen yet in Justin Trudeau's government. So over the next few days, I'll definitely be unpacking this for you in greater detail, but I wanted to start by talking about that concept of spending and divisiveness. When I was at Stephen Harper's cabinet table, and I mean, I think Prime Minister Harper did a really great job in managing Canada's finances, but one thing that he always instilled in us was no matter what we were doing, federal policy should be about uniting the country, especially when we're looking at economic policy, that we should be coming up with policy that's been in the best interest of all regions. That is not what Justin Trudeau has done with this cover-up spending. So there's tens of billions of dollars of deficit, which means higher taxes in the future, for sure. We already know that he's raised taxes, things like the carbon tax, these sorts of things. But I want to read you a couple of excerpts to prove this sort of divisive theme that's in this spending. So in one part of the budget, they talk about employment rates in Canada. And as an Alberta MP, one line really struck out to me. So he's talking about Alberta, Saskatchewan, Newfoundland, and Labrador. And the line that really jumped out was, overall, employment and wage growth in these provinces continues to be affected by the lasting effects of lower world oil prices. Well, that's interesting. I think there's quite a bit of demand for oil around the world. In fact, Canada imports oil from other countries. And why? Because Justin Trudeau introduces bills like Bill C-69, the No More Pipelines bill, the tanker ban in C-48, the carbon tax, the unwillingness for him to invoke the constitutional federal jurisdiction on pipeline projects, the fact that he vetoed Northern Gateway. I mean, the audacity of the fact that he is trying to explain away tens of thousands, over 100,000 people out of work in the energy sector due to lower world oil prices is ridiculous. It would be laughable if it wasn't as serious. So he's got this entire tens of billion dollars of spending, and he doesn't even understand that the energy sector crisis in Canada is caused by the fact that he has created a climate of investment instability in Canada. It takes stability and predictability for capital to be invested in the energy sector. And when we see these bills, C-69, C-42, the carbon tax, all of these sorts of things, and the lack of political will to get energy infrastructure built, that's what's depressing wages and driving away jobs. like just the audacity of them explaining it away to lower prices is, any of you who are in the energy sector knows how ridiculous that is. Anybody who knows that. So, that didn't bode well for reading the rest of this massive document trying to explain why we're spending tens of billions of dollars on virtually nothing and seeing no GDP growth for it. So I thought, okay, well, let's keep reading. So then further in the document, talking about Alberta and Saskatchewan, he goes, however, unemployment rates in these provinces remain well above levels before the decline in oil prices that began in 2014. So, okay, so if you're seeing a decline in prices, and we've seen some change in that in recent years, why would you make things worse, Trudeau? Like, why would you put C69 in place? Why would you put the carbon tax isn't even going to reduce greenhouse gas emissions, but he put it in place anyways. Why would you put C42? Why wouldn't you take a leadership position in getting energy infrastructure built, doing things like invoking 9210C of the Constitution Act, or referring court cases directly to the Supreme Court? Or I could, why wouldn't he do that? No, he's explaining it away to something else. You experienced it differently, energy sector workers. That's what he's saying in this thing. And that's bananas. Now, here's the thing. What he doesn't talk about in any of this, in the huge deficits that we have, and the declining GDP growth that we have in spite of his huge deficit that he's accumulating, is how much that decrease in revenue from the energy sector and in growth is affecting Canada's economy writ large, and moreover affecting government revenue. That's nowhere in this document. And that's why this is divisive, because going back to what I said before, if your focus and your leadership responsibility in putting together federal economic policy is to unite the country, then he's not only spectacularly failed in uniting the country with this, this is divisive language. This just shows that whoever wrote this and him has no idea what's going on in one of the biggest, most important parts of the Canadian economy, right? It's crazy. So I'm going to come to you with some of these tables, and I'm going to do a comparison year over year on what they forecasted the deficit to be and what they forecasted our growth rate of our economy to be, to show just how wrong they've been. But there's something else that is completely missing in this divisive cover-up spending, and that is the fact that nowhere in this does he talk about the problem of equalization. And it's this little taboo topic that nobody wants to talk about. But we're now starting to, there's provinces and parts of the country that, because growth has declined in sectors like the energy sector, the dependency and the problem of equalization is becoming more acute. I pulled up the numbers just for 2017, and I looked at this over time, but in 2017, Alberta paid to the federal government $50.3 billion and got back from the federal government $28.4 billion. You guys do the math on that. That's not sustainable. You can't tell a province that it's going to take virtually $25 billion out of its coffers and then try and put in place the most punitive policy possible to destroy one of its primary industries, and then blame it on declining prices when it's the government's own fault in creating an unstable regulatory environment. That is crazy. And nowhere in this divisive document that spends all this money are we having that conversation. And a real leader would get that and would do something about it. I mean, I could rant at you guys for a long time about what's happened this week that is virtually getting no attention. It should be the top news story right now, over and over again. The fact that, while Trudeau's been so embroiled in trying to, stop Jody Wilson-Raybould and Jane Philippot from speaking, the Chinese have stopped imports on most of our agriculture sector, 40% of our canola market. I mean, I could talk to you just about that and what kind of, that's nowhere in this deficit forecast garbage. But I guess I want to say this. If you've never really had a look at federal economic policy or federal spending, you need to care about this particular document, because Trudeau is spending so much money for so little. And this is going to have a major impact on Canada's economy for years and years and years to come. And the fact that he's not addressing these fundamental structural issues that for the most part have been his creating with his hand, then it's a problem. So you say, okay, well, Michelle, we know Trudeau's, really screwing up here. What are you guys going to do differently when you form government in October? First of all, we would acknowledge these things and talk about them. And I know that sounds so simple, but I mean, I think Justin Trudeau thinks that by essentially giving the finger to different parts of this country, that these problems are just going to balance themselves. And we know that's not the case. We need to have a plan. And this is why we've been so strong in talking about creating that stable investment climate for job creators, right? This is why we oppose the small business tax increase. This is why we said that we would scrap the carbon tax. This is why we have opposed and have said, look, Bill C-69, C-42, these are all things that, would not help the Canadian economy and that we would seek to reverse. I mean, these are fundamental structural issues that differentiate the position of anybody who is seeking to lead this country in a unified manner versus the Liberal government, right? I gotta tell you, this is shocking what came out last week. And I'm sitting here reading this, and I just wanted to come to you to say that as I'm reading this, I am not just infuriated and disgusted as a legislator, but as a Canadian. I mean, this is robbery. It's robbery of your tax dollars right now. It's misuse of your tax dollars. And frankly, it's robbing a lot of Canadians of their future. So I'm going to be coming to you over the next few days with some of the big, egregious fails in here in terms of spending. And there are so many to unpack. But I just want to let you know that on the front of this, the big problem is this is spending that was designed to change the channel on a corruption scandal, going into a federal election where this man hopes that you will just turn a blind eye to all of that and let him continue to dividing the country on policy like this. And we can't let that happen. I'm going to keep working hard for you here in Ottawa, unpacking this really large piece of junk on your behalf, and then trying to oppose it. Working hard for you in Ottawa. Have a great day.